Hello, this video is for Year 10. I've just been through a load of your coursework essays, and I'm thinking that you're having a lot of trouble with your helicopters. With that in mind, I've tried to make a little video to help to explain one or two ideas I have about perspective when you write an essay. If you have a look at the video, you'll see that I've tried to split the kind of level of perspective that you might use when writing an essay into roughly 4. So at the top you've got the sort of broadest helicopter view, the kind of widest view of what you're writing about, in the most general sense. And as you take steps down, you can see that there are a couple of intermediate levels, and then the very most detailed level at the bottom. You can see the helicopter on a fairly reasonable path at the moment, stepping up and down between the layers.
A good essay will tend to pause at different levels to make a point before moving on. A bad essay will tend to be stuck at one or other of the levels, and it'll be kind of jammed there, and it won't have the kind of range of different levels of general and specific ideas that help to make your ideas kind of interesting and engaging. So you can see the line being traced here. It maps out an initial introduction, which is obviously a very general perspective, and then steps down towards the sort of hamburger style points that we've always talked about in literature essays, until you come right down to very tiny specific points that you might want to make about language. So there's this kind of stepped flight path from general ideas to narrow specific ideas. You have to do that if you want to take your reader with you. Now you can imagine if it was a real helicopter, that's a fairly logical flight path, assuming that you were sort of trying to take a tour of a piece of terrain. You wouldn't really want to be taking a flight path that was radically different from that. Let's say you're jammed at that general level. Maybe you're writing about a Shakespeare play. You might be full of ideas about what you think about Shakespeare, the fact that you think he's a good playwright. Those kind of ideas are okay up to a point, but if you stay at that general level for very long, your reader's going to start to suspect that actually you never read the play, because you don't know any of the nitty-gritty. It's quite dull. I mean, you can imagine if you're in a real helicopter, it might be kind of nice to swoop down over a town or a village at some point and see some of the smaller features of the landscape.
Let's have a look at another slightly negative model. You see what this poor chap here is doing? He's got some details that he wants to talk about, and every now and again he lurches back to the broadest possible general perspective and then comes flying back down to the tiniest and most specific detail. Now, I wouldn't want to be in this helicopter, and the feeling that you get when you read an essay that's like this is very similar. It's a little bit nauseous. Just when you think you're finding out about the tiniest feature in a particular word, in a particular line of Shakespeare's verse, suddenly you're flung headlong into that wider general perspective.
It doesn't work, really. You need to spend some time at the intermediate levels of detail as well. But you can't get stuck on those either. Again, this person is kind of bobbling along through this intermediate level, but without the details you never feel as if he's going to make a serious point, or that he's in danger of really analysing in an insightful way. And without the general stuff, you tend to feel this person lacks confidence. He doesn't want to get towards too much of a general perspective in case somebody thinks that he's made a wrong decision, and he doesn't come down into the finer details, perhaps because it's too technical and they don't quite understand how to make those kind of detailed points regarding imagery or meter. So again, you have an unsatisfactory flight path. Let's remind ourselves of an effective flight path. Okay, we make a general point, we've got an idea of our own, we start to target a specific part of the text and say again, generally speaking, what we feel about that. We start off on a hamburger style point, which we then substantiate with a quote. Then we analyse that quote very thoroughly before we then start to move up towards our next point. So you're pausing briefly at each of these levels. Probably the one that brings you the most rewards is the specific detailed analysis. But that in itself isn't so worthy if it doesn't include some of the broader perspectives as well. It's the balance really of being able to use perspectives at differing levels of generality, but also being able to make those detailed points that show that you have the thorough, finer understanding of the text that you're writing about. It's the balance of being able to include points at all levels.
Let's have a look at another flight path. There we go. A moment taken at each level as this helicopter takes a steady path, making points in a measured way, staying at the fine-tuned level in order to be able to say something in detail, but not afraid to come up to the heights to make those general points that show that you have an understanding of the whole play, of the whole historical period that you're writing about. I think where some of you are struggling at the moment is in being able to make that transition in a measured way. You're having a tendency to lurch from one perspective, to one level of generality, to another, very suddenly.
Or not having an even mix of big picture and small picture. You're stuck at one level like this. You're not really going to be able to prove that you understand something like, say, the effect of a particular quote. If you're stuck at the broadest general level, like this, you're going to get accused of waffling. In fact, being stuck at any particular level is no good. Because if you want to show that you understand the whole play, you're going to have to speak about it in a general sense. If you want to show that you can understand the effect of a particular literary device, like say a caesura that divides a line, you have to swoop down into that detail. But an endless list of details doesn't do the job either. You don't end up with an essay if that's what you're writing. So I know you're fed up with this now. I can feel how repetitive this seems, but I do feel it's an important point. It's that stepped flight path that's going to do it for you. Spending a little time at the general, a little time at those moderate levels of generality, plenty of time in the details once you've explained to your reader why you're going to those details and what you've proved by examining them, on that steady flow, that flight path that takes you down to detail and up to general, with moments spent on the intermediate levels as well. That's a happy helicopter on that yellow line. And finally, I'm going to show you the worst model of all. This is the person who does not quite have the capacity to understand the difference between what is general and what is specific, or indeed has any real sense of what their opinion is regarding the text that they're writing about. This kind of flight path is going to leave you throwing up in a very short space of time. You've no idea what the person is trying to say, and just as you think they're halfway through a point, they start a new one. They go flying up and down between the general and the specific, and what you end up with is not an essay, but really just a jumbled mass of directionless notes. Essays like this always get an E at best, and often an F or worse. There aren't many of you who are capable of doing that sort of thing, but hopefully the number will be even further reduced. Now, to finally summarise, the red line here shows probably someone who's a bit on the lazy side or a bit arrogant. All they want to do is give you their opinion. The blue line, somebody in the middle who's probably not confident enough to show a real opinion and maybe doesn't understand the text well enough to analyse it in real detail. The green line showed somebody who had worked extremely hard but really didn't have any confidence when it came to showing their own opinion. Please remember, a bit of general, a lot of specific, pull together the things that you've said at the different layers, and you'll end up hopefully with a satisfactory essay. Good luck.